no time has there ever been such a big wave of people believing in alien life. It's a special 2-hour Ancient Aliens event.
And Daniken's theory is mesmerizing because nobody knows anything.
Civil unrest, colossal scientific achievement, and a violent opposition to a war that seemed to have no end in sight. It was a time when everything was questioned, and people over 30 were no longer being trusted.
You had a socio-cultural revolution taking place during this decade. Vietnam, women's lib, civil rights, and political assassinations.
This was a time of terrible world tensions. Nuclear annihilation was on everyone's minds. The Soviets had nuclear weapons and missiles, so did we.
There was tremendous social and academic change all over the world, and particularly in the West. Young people were getting their voice. The status quo that had come out of World War II, the controlling of us, people were rebelling against that. So things were very much changing. In 1962, America's 35th president, John F. Kennedy, announced his nation's ambitious goal of putting a man on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Less than 6 years after Kennedy's audacious proclamation, a book appeared on store shelves. Entitled Chariots of the Gods, it threatened to push the already stretched boundaries of America's most established understandings of history, archaeology, science, and religion. The title, complete with its enigmatic question mark, was as compelling as its inquisitive premise. Did aliens come to Earth centuries ago? Did they leave behind evidence in the form of pyramids, monolithic structures, strange carvings, and even stranger markings in the sands? And if so, could this notion help to explain everything from mankind's origins to the unsolved mysteries of the world's most sacred religions?
Chariots of the Gods reinterpreted ancient historical texts, religious texts, as evidence of ancient alien visitation. It reinterpreted these as being something that was not necessarily divine, but rather something that was extraterrestrial, nuts and bolts technology from another star system.
The author of Chariots of the Gods appeared to be as unthreatening and unlikely as the book's title. A suicide club manager by the name of Eric Daniken.
When I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I was still the managing director of a first-class hotel in Switzerland. I wrote about my ideas. This was this burning fire in me. And now all of a sudden, the people
Schopenhauer?
Not personally. But yes, the philosopher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said something. Each new theory who finally is bloom has 3 stages to run. The first stage, everybody loves. It's nonsense crackpot together. In the second stage, people don't want to speak about it anymore. And in the third stage, the whole world says, oh, that, we always said it.
Chariots of the Gods led to a fundamental rethink about our history, our origins, and indeed our place in the cosmos. The idea that our ancient gods might not be deities at all, but extraterrestrial visitors, was a game changer. I mean, it absolutely turned the orthodoxy
US
on
的
its
fucking
head.
box 的是 LDA 可以晚上做的东西，现在白天做，那是几百盎司。
I believe that Chariots of the Gods was one of the most impactful and most intriguing publications in the modern history. It was full of questions, and that was the big
It
difference.
can be done in night,
The questions made people
and you create
see
this sort of thing during the daytime.
an answer.
What sort of cerebral thinking went through the
Dad
process?
was a machinist on the Saturn V's that went to the moon, and when he read Chariots of the Gods, I think it excited him, and he knew that it might also spark something in me to do my own type of thinking, my own investigation. My dad always wanted me to not take people's word for things, go figure it out for myself. And it is one of the reasons I became a scientist.
It was able to take stories and myths and suggest that there was something real behind it. I found that fascinating, and thinking this way back in the 70s helped motivate and push science a little bit to think about things differently.
I would think that Anakin's theory of ancient aliens appeals to our sense of mystery because we're curious what's out there, what's under there, what's next. But as popular as Chariots of the Gods proved to be with the book-buying public, it was also, perhaps not surprisingly, almost entirely dismissed by members of the academic community.
The early reaction to Chariots of the Gods, especially from the academics, was one of disgust. In the late 60s and early 70s, it was a time when everyone just listened to the experts. And Eric was
Look at that
really
logo.
torn to bits.
LGBTA
People attacked his
fucking
character,
retard 啊，真的
attacked！his research,
你不要跟我讲
methods.
鸡掰是不是？
They just did
干你那
what
最好是
was in them.
pothole 那种东西没有办法晚上做的，真的。我的 fucking 鸡掰呀！
After Chariots of the Gods, it was crushed out more or less by the whole scientific community. Everyone thought, he's crazy. What is he talking about? Then some other critics said, well, he's just a waiter. Because they come from the hotel business, so how can he come up with these kind of ideas? Don't believe him. He's just a science fiction author.
What was lost on many of
这什么
the
东
book
西？
critics was the fact that von Daniken never claimed to be an archaeologist or historian. Instead, he wrote Chariots of the Gods from the perspective of a curious citizen. One
Maintain
posed
what?
compelling
Do
questions,
it.
but
What's
did not
being worked?
presume to supply the
你可以
answers.
晚上做咩？
In the book, I had 238 questions. No, I was not absolutely
And do this on Sunday morning when there's no traffic or at the night. Must do during the 鸡掰的，
had been wrong.
干你 fuck brains 啊，真的。
But I was sure I am on the right track.
But while those in the mainstream academic community were busily trying to tear von Daniken's book apart, the general public found that they could not put it down.
Two lady people who were buying his books, they were interested in what his questions were, and things changed after that.
Everyone needed attention to all the questions that
touching these ceilings. Look up there. Some of the paintings are really gorgeous. I mean, with the rays and the people descending from the sky. Very interesting. It is absolutely impressive here, really. And I know at the moment I still have the same feeling as I had as a 17-year-old. Look up there. All the saints in heaven. And here I learned for the first time that there was a war in heaven. You know, when I was a boy, they told me, when you come in heaven, heaven is the place of absolute happiness. In heaven you are united with God. If you are happy, united with God, then there is no war, no opposition. That's what confuses me. That's how it all started here. Something was wrong in my own religious belief here. So did you have any fellow students that were classmates that were interested in the things that all of a sudden you were like, hey, look at this? No, of course. You know, I was always, even as a boy, I was a so-called alpha animal. I was always the leading one. They were listening to me. Of course, the strong believers want to have nothing to do with Eric's crazy ideas. But I had these thoughts in my mind where I was kneeling here. And I said, my God was omnipotent. My God did not need a vehicle to move from one point A to point B. My God was all over. So all this was confusing. And it all started in this church. So amongst your teachers, did you have a Jesuit priest who said, Eric, you know, if you're interested in this, you should go and read this or that? Exactly. These Jesuit priests were absolutely not orthodox. They were absolutely friendly and helpful. I remember one, I talked to him about my doubts, and he said, Eric, you should read Enoch.
Believed to have been written by Jewish mystics in the 3rd century BC, the Book of Enoch tells the story of the Archangel Michael coming to earth to take the mortal Enoch into the heavenly realms. Once there, Enoch is educated by the angels.
Enoch was taken up to the highest, which is the commander and spaceship of the exaltation, and he learned engineering and astronomy from the extraterrestrials. The commander said, some of our people had sex with humans, and they created giants. And we have to destroy humanity with these giants, and we can do it only by a great flood. The great flood was created by extraterrestrials on purpose. In all mythologies, including the Bible, some gods are coming down and teach the human a great flood will come and destroy you. And this God, they knew it long before, and they knew it because they themselves made the great flood.
Because the Book of Enoch was edited out of the traditional Bible sometime in the 4th century, it is considered to be too far-fetched to be credible by most people of faith. But to a young Eric von Däniken, the Book of Enoch represented a gateway into a world of hidden and forbidden knowledge.
After I read Enoch, I felt myself like an explorer who goes into a jungle and sees new flowers. I said, if Enoch is correct, then there must be more information of old writers, old historians. So I was always looking, and there was more and more coming. Then this fire in me said, Eric, don't write about things which you don't know. Go there, touch them, smell them, speak to the people. I was absolutely sure, not only in my feelings, but in my knowledge, I was on the right track. So I was fighting for it. So you were never an armchair researcher, you were an explorer. Absolutely, I was an explorer. And one of my best friends was an Egyptian. And he invited me, I was 18 and a half years old, to Egypt for 3 weeks, climbing up the pyramid, being under the pyramid in Saqqara, in the Seraphim, etc. So I knew all this from a young man. Of course, I visited in Egypt the Great Pyramid, and it impressed me very, very much. I always had the feeling this is not only done by humans, especially in Egyptology. Many archaeologists, they believe that they know everything. In reality, there are thousands of open questions, starting with the builder of the Great Pyramid.
Exhilarated by his trip to Egypt, Eric spent the his globetrotting paid off in the form of Eric's first best-selling book, Chariots of the Gods.
Did you ever imagine that your ideas would become so big over the decades? No. In the beginning, I found no publisher. Well, we wanted to publish it. 20 publishers rejected it. And then that's another story. Finally, the book was on the market. I was never thinking that this would create a world, a storm around the world of controversy. Well, this is incredibly special, and I feel very honored to have you here because this is something else. The beginning of Chariots of the Gods.
With the publication of Chariots of the Gods in 1968, what began as the bold notions of a curious schoolboy was about to create a paradigm shift in the way mankind would view the universe. There would be no turning back. June 20th, 1969. American astronaut Neil Armstrong becomes the first human in recorded history to set foot on an astronomical body other than planet Earth. With one small step, he becomes our planet's first official extraterrestrial. Within an instant, fanciful notions of aliens and spaceships became a sobering reality.
When it happened, the entire planet erupted in just absolute ecstasy. It was a huge moment for the human spirit. It was considered a victory for all of humanity. Suddenly, science fiction became real. And it opened up a new age of exploration. And this prompted men to question whether or not we were in fact the first to step on the surface of the moon or not.
Science fiction had now become science fact. And words like Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, the wise controversial, were gaining more acceptance than Jim
One of the things I liked was that he was looking at ancient sites from a completely different perspective than other historians. And here they were, images of extraterrestrials, mysterious giant walls, and I wanted to go see them myself.
I remember looking through that book and instantly connecting with the images. There was something very familiar about some of the pictures that we showed. Ancient aliens, cave walls. I was instantly hooked. Since the 1970s, we've seen a major explosion of interest in this area.
I learned about Chariots of the Gods and it blew my mind. It resonated with me so deeply, it just sank in as a truth for me.
That book, it gave us all permission to talk about extraterrestrials coming to Earth and that there could be other explanations for biblical and religious literature than angels.
My grandmother was incredibly open-minded, and instead of reading ordinary bedtime stories to me, she would read Chariots of the Gods sometimes. But I was 5, 6, 7 years old, so she is the one that actually planted the seed to all of a sudden suggest that contact with extraterrestrials may have happened in our remote past. That was revolutionary.
In 1970, Sun Classic Pictures released a feature-length documentary based on von Daniken's book.
Chariots of the Gods, the international bestseller by Eric von Daniken that shattered conventional theories about history and archaeology. Now Sun International brings it to the screen in a startling new film.
Originally produced in Germany, the American language version of the film became the 9th highest grossing movie in North America that year. An incredible achievement for a documentary. It was even nominated for an Oscar.
This was hugely popular when it was released. The impact of that documentary can't be understated.
interesting that we have been visited by beings from elsewhere who not only have created our civilization for us, but mated with human beings. That's, in my view, much more likely to successfully mate with a petunia than an extraterrestrial.
But to the surprise of many, von Daniken was not offended by his critics. Instead, he welcomed them. He believed that his book was meant to ask profound questions, not give answers. Criticism, especially constructive criticism, he argued, would make his findings stronger and even more convincing.
In Delhi, in India, there is a temple and there is an iron pillow. I was there as a 22-year-old man, and this iron pillow did not rust. I was touching it, and the local priest said, this is here since centuries and centuries, and does not rust. So I speculated in Chariots of the God, maybe it's an extraterrestrial connection. In the meantime, this damn thing is rusting. So what can you do? You were simply wrong. So you accept this. I was too young. I was not self-critical enough. I had to learn that sometimes the critics were right, and I was wrong. But that's the process of learning.
Given the mystery of space and the fantastic things that we're beginning to see in quantum, everything is possible. There's so much that is bizarre that we can scientifically examine. I mean, we're trying to find an explanation of why the universe is expanding when it should be contracting, and we apply some theory to it. Why not have ancient aliens come to Earth and build the pyramids, even though it's bizarre? Bizarre is good because it stirs us up.
I think people resist anything that challenges the current paradigm quite often, and people also don't want their life's work challenged. So if someone is that person who has put forward the theory that's been accepted, they don't want you to take that from them by producing new evidence.
Ironically, one of von Daniken's most ardent defenders started out as one of his most outspoken critics. While making a presentation in Huntsville, Alabama in 1972, von Daniken relayed his theory that the Bible's book of Ezekiel, rather than describing an encounter with an angel, was actually the story of an extraterrestrial visitation. In the account, the prophet Ezekiel describes a flying chariot drawn by 4 living creatures. Each creature is flanked by a metallic object, a wheel within a wheel, that Ezekiel observes as it descends, making a tremendous amount of noise.
During his speech, Eric talked about Ezekiel and the wheel that he witnessed, and also that he was taken up in this glory of the Lord, as it is described in the Bible, and likened it to a type of spaceship.
In the audience was NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich, who conducted design research for the Saturn V rocket and Skylab. As a spacecraft designer, he was certain that he could easily refute this interpretation of Ezekiel's wheel.
After the lecture, Blumrich goes up to Eric and he says, you know, this was interesting, but I will defy you. I will go and read the Bible tonight, and I will then write a thesis how what you said tonight is total nonsense.
But after painstaking research, Blumrich was shocked to find himself agreeing with Eric von Daniken. He became convinced that the book of Ezekiel was indeed describing some sort of spacecraft, and he was able to design a practical landing module using the description found in the biblical texts. In 1974, he published his findings in his book, The Spaceships of Ezekiel.
Now, what's so fascinating is that to this day, Blumrich and NASA hold a patent for an omnidirectional wheel. A wheel that actually goes forward and also goes sideways without having to have a steering movement. The omnidirectional wheel is a common technology used today in many, many forklifts because it allows you to get underneath the product without having to move in a obstructive way. And the omnidirectional
theory had found its first champion in the scientific community. But perhaps even more impactful would be the author's influence on a younger and more open-minded generation of scholars, intellectuals, and creative artists. A creative community that included filmmakers who would soon create the most influential and successful science fiction films of all time. 1975 saw the publication of Eric von Daniken's fifth best-selling book, Miracles of the Gods, in which the increasingly prolific author examines miracles and other paranormal phenomena through the prism of what was now being called ancient astronaut theory. The success of the book led to yet another cinematic adaptation. Originally produced in Germany, Mysteries of the Gods was hosted by William Shatner.
That's Captain Kirk. With the rest of the crew of the USS Enterprise, we made many wondrous voyages into the future.